The rain in Port Calloway doesn't just fall, it attacks. It slams the pavement, trying to wash the grit and the sin right into the harbor. Tonight, it was failing. It was just making everything shine. My name is Juniper Vale, and I was watching that rain through the warped plexiglass window of the Spin and Dry, a 24-hour laundromat that smelled like burnt ozone and stale bleach. It was 11:30 at night. The last load, towels from the diner next door, was churning in number 7. My life was a soundtrack of humming machines and the clack of quarters I didn't have. Beside me, curled on the hard plastic bench, was Nori. Nori is 9 years old, but she holds herself like an old woman braced for a storm. She's my niece, my responsibility, my whole world, and the reason I was scrubbing grease traps at a diner and folding strangers' underwear at midnight. My brother. Kevin Nori's father was somewhere in this city, chasing a high he'd traded his daughter for. He left her with me, along with $200 in late rent and a shadow of debt to men who don't take please for an answer. So we stayed hidden in the noise of the city, me and Nori. Her small backpack was at her feet, propped against the bench next to me, looking ridiculous among the rolling laundry baskets. Was my own case, black, scuffed, held together with silver duct tape, but solid. Inside was the only thing of value I owned: a violin. My Juilliard dream before Kevin's problems became my life sentence. Now, it was just dead weight, a reminder of a girl I used to be. Nori wasn't asleep. Her eyes were closed, but her fingers were tapping a silent rhythm on her knee. She was listening. She always was. Nori's brain is different. It's a sponge. She hears a language once, twice, and she finds the pattern. Spanish from the kitchen guys at the diner, Russian from the old men at the corner market, and, thanks to the apartments above us, Mandarin. The dryer buzzed, a harsh, grating sound that snapped me out of my thoughts. "Okay, Bug," I whispered, nudging her. "Last load, then we go home." Home was 2 blocks over, a 4th-floor walk-up with bad wiring and a lock Kevin had already broken twice. I folded the hot, rough towels, stacking them in my bag. Nori zipped up her jacket, her small face pale under the fluorescent lights. I grabbed my violin case, slung my bag over my shoulder, and we stepped out into the assault. The rain was cold, instantly soaking my hair. The neon sign of the laundromat hissed behind us, casting red and blue light on the wet asphalt. Port Calloway's harbor was close. I could hear the low, guttural groan of a foghorn. It sounded like a warning. We kept our heads down, walking fast. My plan was simple: get to our street, up the stairs, bolt the door, and pray Kevin didn't decide tonight was the night to show up. Desperate and angry. But we had to cross Halcyon Avenue first. And that's where the world stopped. They weren't just cars. They were statements. A 3-car convoy of gleaming black SUVs, the kind that cost more than my entire building. They were parked along the curb, engines idling with a sound that was more of a purr than a rumble. They were armored. Even I could tell. The glass was too thick, the bodies too solid. And men in black suits stood in the rain as if they didn't feel it. My hand instinctively tightened on Nori's. "Don't look," I muttered, pulling her closer. "Just walk." This was their world, the other side of Port Calloway, the one that ran on fear and shadows, the one you read about in the papers with a sick feeling in your stomach. A door opened at the far end of the street, from a private club I didn't even know existed. 2 men stepped out, holding umbrellas, and then he emerged. I'd never seen him in person, but no one in the city didn't know his face. Adrian Volterra, the head of the Volterra Syndicate. He was the reason the harbor foghorns sounded like warnings. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than my college tuition. His hair was dark, his face was all sharp angles, and he moved with a chilling, predatory grace. He was walking toward the center SUV, the biggest one. His guards were fanned out, scanning every rooftop, every alley. They were professionals. I was pulling Nori along, trying to be invisible, just another piece of trash blowing down the street. We were almost past them, almost at the corner. Then Nori stopped. She froze solid, her small hand ripping out of mine. "Nori, come on," I hissed, panic flaring in my chest. "Auntie June," she whispered. Her voice was thin, terrified. She was staring, not at Volterra, but at two of his guards. They were standing near the rear of the convoy, partially hidden in the darkness of an alleyway, speaking to each other. They were speaking Mandarin. "Nori, now!" I grabbed her arm. "They're talking about the car," she whispered, her eyes wide, locked on the two men. "I don't care, we're leaving." "No, June, listen." She was shaking. They said, "Bauya o ra'angta jancha." Don't let him in the car. A cold dread, sharper and colder than the rain, washed over me. What? And ha is a da encha ca si ang. Her pronunciation was perfect, a stark contrast to her trembling voice. The black battery layer. I looked at the two guards. They were looking back at us. One of them had noticed the 9-year-old girl staring at them. He'd seen her listening. And in that half a second, my whole world tilted. It wasn't about Adrian Volterra. It wasn't about saving a mafia boss. It was about those two men, and the fact that they saw Nori. They saw her listen. They heard her whisper. If Volterra got in that car and something happened, those two men would be the only ones who knew we'd heard. And they would not leave witnesses, especially not a 9-year-old witness who could understand them. We were dead. We were dead if I did nothing, and we were probably dead if I did something. But probably dead was better. "Nori," I said, my voice sharp. "The newsstand, behind it. Get behind it and do not move." For once, she didn't argue. She scrambled into the shadows behind the rusted metal kiosk. My heart was a hummingbird in my ribs. My violin case felt heavy. I took a breath, and I ran. I ran right out into the middle of Halcyon Avenue, into the rain, right toward the most dangerous man in the city. "Stop!" I screamed. The world exploded into motion. Two of the guards nearest to me were on me before I'd taken 3 steps. One arm slammed across my chest, the other grabbed my arm, twisting it behind my back with brutal, practiced efficiency. The air left my lungs in a pained grunt. My violin case, I hadn't let go. I was holding it up, a useless, pathetic shield, a white flag. "Don't move," one of them growled in my ear, his breath hot. Adrian Volterra had stopped. He was halfway to his car door. He turned, and his eyes, God, his eyes lasered right onto me. They were dark, assessing, and utterly devoid of emotion. He was a statue in the rain. "Stop, don't get in the car," I yelled again, struggling against the steel grip. My niece, she heard them. The guards in the alley, they were speaking Chinese. This got a reaction. The two guards in the alley tensed. The guard holding me tried to haul me backward, to shut me up. "She heard them!" I screamed, desperate. I pointed with my chin, a spastic jerk toward the rear of the SUV. "They said, don't let him in the car. They talked about a black battery layer. In the car, something's in the car." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the rain and the idling engines. Adrian Volterra did not look at me. He looked at the two guards in the alley. Then he looked at the rear wheel well of his own vehicle. He didn't speak. He just gave a slight, almost imperceptible flick of his chin. It was all it took. One of his men, a different one, dressed more like a technician than a bodyguard, pulled a device from his jacket and knelt by the rear wheel well. Another one joined him, shining a high-intensity flashlight. The guard was still crushing my arm. I watched, my breath held, as the technician carefully, methodically, opened a panel near the wheel. And then they all froze. The technician looked up at Volterra. His face was ashen. I saw it. Even from where I was, a block, a black, dense-looking battery pack wedged into the chassis, wires snaked from it, leading up into the guts of the truck. "Sir," the technician said, his voice terrifyingly calm, "we have a device. It's wired to the door's pressure seal, and the seats." My stomach turned to ice. A black battery layer. Nori's words. It wasn't on a timer. The timer was silent. The tech said, but the vibration sensor was live. It was waiting, waiting for the door to close, for the pressure of the most important man in the city to settle into his custom-made seat. It was designed to go off the second he thought he was safe. The scene shifted, fast. The professional calm broke into controlled chaos. EOD team, now gel packs, now, someone yelled. Get him back, get him back. Adrian Volterra was pulled away, back toward the club, but he wasn't looking at the car. He was looking at me. Then his eyes moved, past me, to the newsstand. Get the girl, he said. His voice was low, a quiet rumble, but it cut through the noise like a razor. Before I could protest, the guard holding me was dragging me away from the SUV toward the sidewalk. Another man had already ducked behind the newsstand and was pulling a terrified Nori out by the arm. No, don't hurt her, I yelled, fighting again. Ma'am, we are moving you to a safe perimeter, the guard said, his voice flat. But Adrian Volterra was walking toward us, his face a mask of cold calculation. He stopped in front of me. The rain plastered his dark hair to his skull. His eyes scanned me, then Nori. You said she heard them, he stated. It wasn't a question. I nodded, unable to speak. A team of men in heavy gear was swarming the SUV, spraying a thick chemical foam into the wheel well. They were encasing it. Volterra's gaze locked on Nori. She was trying to hide behind my legs, clutching my wet jeans. You understood them, he said to her. Nori, bless her terrified, brilliant heart, gave a small, jerky nod. What did you hear? He asked. His voice was softer now, but no less intense. Nori peeked out. She swallowed. They said may, see, and susi. The door lock and hey, sha, en. It means a replacement, a substitute, like a double. Adrian Volterra's eyes narrowed. He looked at his men, then back at Nori. He was putting pieces together I couldn't even see. We heard a muffled thump. I flinched, pulling Nori into me. The sound was heavy, compressed, not the massive explosion I had pictured, but a contained, violent pop. The SUV's windows spiderwebbed. The foam had done its job. It hadn't been a massive boom. But it was enough. It was the sound of what would have happened, the sound of my life ending. I was shaking, the adrenaline finally hitting my knees. Adrian Volterra looked at the two of us, two drowned rats shivering on the sidewalk. Me still clutching my worthless violin case. He looked at the smoking, foamed-up SUV. He looked at the alley, where his men were already dragging the two Mandarin-speaking guards out. Then he looked back at me. His decision was instant. I saw it settle in his eyes. You're both coming with me, he said. What? No, I stammered, holding Nori tight. We have to go home. We didn't see anything, I promise. He took a step closer, and I had to fight the urge to step back. The sheer power rolling off him was suffocating. You just saved my life, and he said, well, his voice a low, dark promise. And you, he looked at Nori, heard the men who tried to take it. They saw you. You are not going home. You are not safe there anymore. He turned to the man who still had a light grip on my arm. Put them in the backup car, now. No, please, I begged, but it was useless. The guard was already steering me, steering us toward the third SUV, the one that had been waiting. My violin case banged against my leg. I looked back at the steaming wreck, at the red and blue lights of the laundromat, at the life I had just lost. Adrian Volterra was already walking toward us, his face set like stone. The rain didn't dare touch him, and as the heavy, armored door of the SUV opened, I knew, deep in my bones, that I hadn't just saved a life. I had just stepped into a cage. The ride in the backup SUV was silent, but it screamed in my ears. The leather smelled new, sterile, and the silence was heavier than the armored doors that had shut with a terrifying bank vault thud. Nori hadn't made a sound. She just sat beside me, her small fingers tracing the seam on the velvet upholstery, while I stared at the back of Adrian Volterra's head. He hadn't spoken. He just issued quiet commands into a phone that looked more like a military device than anything I'd ever seen. We'd moved through Port Calloway at speeds that felt illegal, cutting through alleys and running red lights, until we plunged into a subterranean parking garage. A private elevator opened directly into his world. The doors slid open, not onto a hallway, but onto the sky. We were in the penthouse, the Mistral Hotel. I'd seen it from the street, a needle of glass and steel that pierced the fog. Now, I was inside it. The first thing that hit me wasn't the view, it was the quiet. It was an expensive, processed silence. The floors were black onyx, polished to a mirror sheen, reflecting the city lights like a captured constellation. The walls were glass. All of them. Port Calloway was laid out below us, a glittering, rain-slicked map. The furniture was sparse, angular, and looked like it had been carved from blocks of ice. It wasn't a home, it was a statement. It was cold, minimalist, and absolute. It was him. I was instantly, painfully aware of myself. My jeans were damp. My shoes, worn thin at the heel, squeaked on the stone. I was still clutching my violin case, the silver duct tape on the handle seeming to glow like a scar under the recessed lighting. My other hand gripped my canvas tote bag. Inside were 3 changes of clothes, 2 stale granola bars, my toothbrush, and a sheaf of unfinished sheet music. Everything I owned felt like garbage. While I was shrinking, trying to pull into myself, Nori was moving. Her fear had been replaced by a 9-year-old's consuming curiosity. She'd slipped her hand from mine and walked, trance-like, toward the far wall. It wasn't a wall, it was an aquarium. It was massive, at least 12 feet long, built into the structure itself. But it wasn't fish, it was a living coral reef, glowing with an alien blue and purple light. Tiny, vibrant creatures flitted through structures that looked like delicate sculptures. Nori, a child of concrete and dirty harbor water, just stood there, her small hand pressed against the glass, utterly mesmerized. Men in dark suits moved on the periphery. They were ghosts. They spoke in low tones, headsets in their ears, never looking at us but always aware. A woman in a crisp, gray uniform, a housekeeper, maybe a chef approached us. She had a kind face, stressed but kind. "Miss Little Girl," she said softly, holding a tray, "some warm milk water." Nori turned from the reef. She looked at the woman, and then she spoke. Not in English. She spoke in perfect flowing Mandarin. She pointed at the tank. "Tia men da uhan pia oliang," she said clearly. "They are all very beautiful. Nage la nsa desha sha si mi." "What is the blue one?" The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The woman, who was Taiwanese, froze, her tray wobbling. The 2 men in suits by the elevator stopped their conversation mid-word. The entire vast, cold room went utterly silent. And across the expanse, by the glass wall overlooking the harbor, Adrian Volterra, who had been deep in a low, furious phone call, slowly turned his head. The chef, her eyes wide, replied in hesitant Mandarin, asking Nori how she knew the language. Nori just shrugged, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, and asked again about the fish. Volterra ended his call. He walked toward us. He'd taken off his suit jacket, and in the stark white shirt and dark slacks, he looked less like a businessman and more like a panther. He didn't look at me. He was focused entirely on my niece. "That," he said, his voice a quiet rumble that vibrated in the onyx floor, "is not normal talent." He wasn't complimenting her. He was assessing her, cataloging. "It's pattern recognition," he continued, watching Nori chatter with the stunned chef. "She hears it, she doesn't just mimic it, she finds the structure, she decodes it." The way he said decodes sent a chill right through my wet clothes. I felt my fear calcify into something hard and sharp. I stepped forward, placing myself halfway between him and Nori. "She's 9 years old," I said. My voice was shaking, but I didn't care. "She's not a tool. She's not a piece of equipment for you." He finally looked at me. His eyes were dark, unreadable. "I just want her to be safe." I pushed, my hand gripping the strap of my violin case. "I just want her to go to a normal school. That's all." He held my gaze for a long, heavy moment. I saw a flicker of something. It wasn't pity. It wasn't kindness. It might have been surprise, or maybe just annoyance. "No one," he said, and his voice was so flat and final it was like a hammer hitting steel. "Will touch Nori." It wasn't a reassurance. It was a decree. She'll have a private tutor, the best. Starting tomorrow, she won't be leaving this floor. He then glanced at me. A quick, dismissive scan. "As for you, you now have protection, whether you wanted it or not." Protection. He said it like a life sentence. And I knew, in that sterile, beautiful prison, that he was right. I was marked. By saving him, I had painted a target on my back for everyone else. I read the papers while waiting for the spin cycle. I knew the acronyms, the whispers, the Tri-State Strategic Crimes Unit, the TSSCU, the feds in tailored suits who had been trying to build a racketeering case against Volterra for 5 years, the Federal Commerce Guard, the FCG, who ran the docks and were rumored to be just another gang with different uniforms. And then there was MIBX, the Metropolitan Integrity Bureau, the spooks, the ones no one saw, who were rumored to be watching everyone, including the other agencies. They all wanted a piece of Adrian Volterra, and I had just become the girl holding his hand. A man in a suit, older, with graying temples and a worried look, hurried over to Volterra, holding a tablet. He spoke too low for me to hear, but I saw the muscles in Adrian's jaw tighten. "The Woojin Circle," my Adrian said, his voice laced with a cold fury. "They bought someone on the hotel's internal staff. The security manifests were compromised." The Woojin Circle. The name hit me like a physical blow. The men in the alley, the men who spoke Mandarin, the men who tried to kill him, the men who knew Nori had been there, who knew she understood. My blood turned to ice water. I thought of my brother, Kevin. My fatal, gaping weakness. Nori was my niece, but Kevin was still her father, her legal guardian. And Kevin was a black hole, sucking in loyalty, trust, and every dollar he could find for his next fix. He was desperate. He was weak. If the Woojin Circle found him, if they offered him a few $100s, he would trade Nori. He would give her to them, legally. I had no rights. I'd been trying to get custody for a year, but the courts were slow and I was broke. I was nobody. It was the nightmare that lived under my bed. As if he had plucked the thought right from my skull. Adrian turned back to me. His eyes were assessing again. "Your brother, Kevin Vale. He's a liability." "I take care of her," I snapped, my voice too high. "The state doesn't see it that way," he said, his calmness making my panic feel frantic. "Not yet." He picked up a phone on the stark, modern desk. He dialed one number. "Get Marcus up here. Now." He hung up and looked at me. "I'm sending my lawyer. He's connected with the Civic Security Commission." I knew the name. The commission was a phantom city agency, a board of concerned citizens with the power to cut through red tape. A group everyone knew was in the pocket of men like Volterra. "He'll draw up the papers," Adrian said. "Emergency guardianship, allegations of endangerment, neglect. We'll cite your brother's known associates." He almost smiled. "He'll have a judge sign it before sunrise. You'll have full, ironclad custody of Nori." I couldn't breathe. The one thing I had prayed for, fought for, the one thing that kept me awake at night, the legal right to protect my niece, he was handing it to me like a glass of water. It was salvation. It was the purest, most profound relief I had ever known. And it was a shackle. The second I signed that paper, I was his. I was indebted. I had traded my freedom for her safety. Nori, oblivious to the transaction that had just taken place, had wandered over to a low-glass coffee table. She'd found a thick, cream-colored notepad and a heavy hotel pen. She was drawing. I walked over, needing to be near her, needing to touch her. "What are you drawing, Bug?" It wasn't the fish. It was a truck, a big, boxy SUV drawn with a child's shaky lines. She had drawn the back wheel, and next to it, she'd drawn a small, dark square, the black battery layer. Then, she'd drawn a line. It started at the black box. It snaked under the chassis of her drawing, up through the floor, and stopped in the middle of the driver's seat. She had drawn a little stick figure sitting in the seat, his hands on the wheel. A team of Volterra's men were across the room, huddled around blueprints of the SUV, arguing about timers and remote signals. Adrian noticed. He walked over, his steps silent on the stone. He crouched down, not like a man unused to it, but with a sudden, fluid grace. He was looking at Nori's drawing. "Why the line to the seat? Nori," he asked. His voice was still that quiet, dangerous rumble, but the edge was gone. It was just curiosity. Nori didn't look up. She just pointed with the pen. "'Cause that's what makes it go," she whispered. "Not just the door. The door was the lock. They needed the THN." She looked up at him, her eyes wide and serious. The substitute. They needed him. Adrian Volterra stared at the drawing. He looked at the line going to the seat. He looked at Nori, and then, slowly, he looked up at me. And I saw it. I saw the whole terrifying picture. Nori wasn't just a witness. She wasn't just a translator. She was the only one who had understood the intent. The device wasn't just a trap, it was a targeted, personalized execution. The Wujin Circle had failed tonight because of her. They knew it. They would not stop until the only person who could decode their plans was silenced. My brother would sell us for $50. The feds and the MIBX would use us as bait. Our little fourth-floor apartment with its broken lock wasn't a home. It was a death trap. This place, this cold, beautiful, glass box in the sky, owned by the most dangerous man in Port Calloway. It wasn't a cage. It was the only fortress we had. To protect Nori, to keep her alive, I had to chain myself to the one man everyone else in the city was trying to kill. The lawyer, Marcus, had come and gone while the city was still dark. He was smooth, expensive, and moved with the quick, reptilian efficiency of a man who understood power. I signed the emergency guardianship papers on that glass desk, my hand shaking so badly the first attempt at my signature was just a jagged line. By 4 a.m, Nori was legally, unequivocally mine. The shackle had clicked shut. By 6 a.m, the sun was just a dirty rumor over the harbor, and the penthouse was a command center. Nori was in a corner of the vast living room, finally asleep on a sofa that cost more than my violin, clutching the velvet cushion. I hadn't slept. I was running on stale coffee and pure, high-octane terror. I was watching them work. The design was specific. A man named Sal, Volterra's lead technician, was explaining. He had Nori's drawing my heart seized when I saw it projected onto a massive screen on the wall. He'd enhanced it, turning her crayon lines into a 3D schematic. The trigger was dual stage. Stage 1, the door seal closing. That arms the primary. Stage 2, the pressure sensor in the driver's seat. It was calibrated to Mr. Volterra's exact weight, plus or minus 5 pounds. A heavy silence filled the room. This wasn't a random attack. This was intimate. The device was military grade, but the components, they're specialized. Sal continued, tapping his tablet. Sourced from a high-end audio and acoustics supplier. Where? Adrian Volterra's voice. He was standing by the window, a black silhouette against the graying sky. We traced the serials. It's a shell company. Hudson Sound Logistics. They operate exclusively out of a warehouse at Harbor 9. The name hung in the air. Harbor 9. That was Wujin Circle territory. They didn't just try to kill him. They did it using their own supply chain, right under his nose. I felt sick. I needed to check on Nori, needed to touch her, to prove she was still real. I walked over to the couch. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale. I stroked her hair back from her forehead. The Taiwanese chef, the kind woman from last night, approached me quietly. "Let her sleep, miss," she whispered. "I'll bring her some congee when she wakes. She can eat in the kitchen. It's warm." I nodded, grateful. "Thank you." An hour later, Nori was awake. She was too intimidated by the glass and steel to stay in the living room, so she followed the chef into the massive, gleaming kitchen. I trailed her, a nervous shadow, but she seemed to relax by the warm stoves. The staff, all speaking a mix of Cantonese and Mandarin, moved around her, giving her small, sad smiles. I left her there, sitting at a steel prep table with a bowl of warm rice porridge, and went back to the living room. I felt useless, a piece of driftwood caught in a whirlpool. The men were arguing about security protocols, about routes, about how the perimeter at the Mistral had been breached. The air was thick with blame. Then Nori was at my elbow. She wasn't crying. Her eyes were wide, and she was holding a half-eaten steamed bun. "Auntie June," she whispered, pulling my sleeve. "What's wrong, Bug? Are you hungry? You want something else?" "No," she shook her head, pulling me further away from the men. "The radio, in the kitchen. It's like the one at Mr. Chen's market. It gets the stations from China." Okay. They were talking, not the chefs, the men on the radio. They're on the same channel as the kitchen comms, I think. Her voice dropped so low I could barely hear it. They used a word, xi. My blood went cold. I knelt, gripping her small shoulders. "Nori, what does that mean?" "Swap car," she whispered, "like the substitute from last night. They're talking about a swap car." "What else?" My voice was barely a breath. "A different word, one I heard twice." She looked scared. "They said wawa."
Wawa!
"It means doll." She looked down at her feet. But the way they said it, it sounded like something small, something easy to carry. They said wawa, and then they said Harbor 9. They said the doll was the key. It wasn't a key. It was leverage. It wasn't in it. It was her. My heart stopped. They weren't just trying to kill Adrian Volterra anymore. They had failed, and now they were moving to the one person who had stopped them. The substitute plan wasn't for Volterra. It was for Nori. A swap. Her for something. Or just her. I stood up. The room was spinning. I saw the head of Volterra's security, a thick-necked man named Corso, barking orders by the elevator. I walked right up to him. The fear was gone, replaced by a white-hot rage I didn't know I possessed. "You need to listen to me," I said. He turned, annoyed. "Ma'am, I'm busy. Go sit down. We have this handled." "No, you don't. They're changing the plan. My niece, she heard them again. On an internal channel, and they're talking about Harbor 9. They're talking about a swap car and a doll. Don't you understand? The doll is her. They're coming for her." Corso stared at me like I was insane. He actually, patronizingly, patted my arm. "Miss Vale, I appreciate your input, but we're professionals. We don't operate on—" He waved a dismissive hand. "Overheard chatter from a 9-year-old. The target is Mr. Volterra. We're locking him down." "You idiot," I snapped, my voice rising. "She was right last night. She drew the map of the bomb. She was right about the seat sensor." "And we're grateful," he said, his face hardening. "Now, please, step aside." He turned his back on me. I stood there, shaking with frustration. He was going to let her die. He was so focused on the king. He didn't see them coming for the pawn. "Corso." Adrian Volterra's voice cut through the room. Corso spun around. "Sir." "You're done," Volterra said it quietly. He was walking toward us. "Get out of my sight." Corso's face went purple. "Sir, I'm just trying to—" "You're dismissed. Sal, you're in charge of the team." Corso stormed off toward the stairs, his face a mask of fury. Volterra didn't watch him go. His eyes were on me. He stopped a few feet away. His entire team of analysts and trigger pullers was watching. The room was silent. "Tell me, Anne," he said. And so I did. I told him everything. About the kitchen radio, the THA, the wah-wah. I told him that Nori wasn't just guessing, that she understood context, that her drawing last night wasn't a lucky doodle, it was analysis. She's the only one who's been right about any of this. I finished, my voice desperate. "You're all looking for assassins. You should be looking for kidnappers. They're not trying to kill you anymore. They're trying to get her." His men were staring at me, Skeptical, angry. I was just a civilian, the girl from the laundromat. Volterra was silent for a long time. He watched me, his dark eyes searching my face. I felt like he was peeling back my skin, looking at the bones underneath. Then, the smallest, almost imperceptible thing happened. The corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile, not really. It was a flicker of warmth, a brief crack in the marble. It was so unexpected. It made my stomach do a slow, confusing roll. It wasn't romantic. It was the smile of a predator that had just found a new, sharper tooth. "A decoy," he said, turning to his new team. Sal, the tech, blinked. "Sir." "She's right. They missed. Now they want leverage. They know we moved. They know the Mistral is compromised. They're watching us." He looked at me. "They're watching you? So we give them a show." He started pacing, and the energy in the room snapped to him. "The new habit. I'm moving, but not to a fortress. I'm moving to a less secure location. A temporary step. We'll use the Aramore Tower. It's high-end, but the garage is public. It's a tempting target." "Sir, that's too much exposure," as Sal protested. "Exactly," Volterra said. "We'll send a decoy convoy, 2 cars, the swap car. They'll be watching for me. They'll be watching for her." He looked at Sal. "I want a driver who looks like me. I want a child in the back, tinted windows. Make it look right. Send them down Halcyon, past the laundromat. Make it look like I'm sentimental." A chill ran down my spine. He was using my life as bait. "While they're watching the bait," he continued, "we'll move. Me, Miss Vale, and Nori. A single, unarmored car, no escort. We'll use the service tunnels and come into the Aramore through the kitchens. They'll be watching the front door. We'll already be inside." It was brilliant. It was terrifying. And it was all based on Nori's whisper. The move was a blur. 1 minute, Nori and I were being hurried down a freight elevator that smelled of fish, my violin case banging against my hip. The next, we were in the back of a black sedan, driven by Adrian Volterra himself. No guards, just us. We slipped into the Aramore Tower's garage, and he badged us into a private elevator. The apartment was smaller than the penthouse, but just as sterile. All white marble and chrome. "You're safe here," he said, as the door slid shut. "My best men are on the floor above and below. No one gets in." He left. I stood in the silent, white apartment, safe. That night, Nori was asleep in a bedroom that looked like a hotel catalog. I was standing in the living room, trying to breathe. Then the lights flickered. A small bing sound came from the hallway. The digital panel by the door flashed red. Elevator call unauthorized. My heart hammered. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a chrome lamp, and moved toward Nori's room. The panel flashed again. Elevator call override. Floor lock engaged. And then silence. The light steadied. My phone, a new one Volterra had given me, buzzed. It was him. A text. "They're testing the system. They know we're here. Don't move." My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the phone. The elevator, it had glitched twice. They were testing the alarms. They were already here. The television was on, muted. A local news report, the chyron at the bottom of the screen, caught my eye. "Sources inside MIBX leak potential Volterra Neo-CD pact." I turned the volume up. A bland newscaster was talking. A rumored signing between the Volterra Syndicate and the North Atlantic Organized Crime Directorate. This pact would consolidate control over 90% of Port Callaway's shipping. North Atlantic Organized Crime Directorate, NAOCD. It sounded like a government agency, a trade commission. But I knew. Everyone knew. It was a lie. It was a front for the oldest, deadliest alliance of criminals on the East Coast. Adrian Volterra was making a deal, and someone the Woojin Circle was willing to kill him to stop it, or, more likely, to take his seat at the table. The glass door to the balcony slid open. I jumped, swinging the lamp. It was him. He'd come from the adjoining suite, or the roof. He was just there. "The leak was intentional," he said, his voice flat. He was staring out at the city. MIBX is trying to paint me into a corner, put pressure on the deal. Is it true, I asked, my voice small. He didn't answer. He just looked at me. The elevator, they have an inside key. Someone on my personal team. The paranoia was a physical thing, a fog in the room. He was surrounded by enemies, the Woojin Circle, the feds, MIBX, and a traitor. The circle of trust had shrunk. It was him, Sal, a few others, and me. I realized it with a jolt. I wasn't just a refugee. I was the one person in this tower who he knew. 100% was not his enemy. My terror, my desperation for Nori, it was the only thing he could trust. I had become, in less than 24 hours, an unwilling advisor. My responsibility wasn't just to Nori anymore. It was, somehow, to him. The wind on the balcony was fierce, whipping his hair. He hadn't moved, just stood there, staring at the lights of Harbor 9 in the distance. I put the lamp down. I walked, slowly, until I was standing near the door. He was quiet for so long I thought he'd forgotten I was there. Then he spoke, his voice so low it was almost carried away by the wind. I owe you my life, Juniper. It wasn't a thank you. It wasn't an absolution. It was a fact. A debt had been established, and in his world, a debt like that was heavier than any bullet. It was a chain, binding me to him, binding him to me in this fortress of glass and fear. That debt, I owe you my life. The words hung in the air on the balcony, heavier than the armored doors of his car. It wasn't an expression of gratitude. It was a statement of fact, a ledger entry. And in his world, a debt like that was a claim. He left me there, stepping back into the white marble apartment to take a call, his voice a low, lethal murmur. I stayed on the balcony, clutching the railing. The wind was high, whipping my hair across my face, stinging my eyes. I was 28 stories up, in a fortress I couldn't leave, bound to a man who had just declared ownership of my life, because I'd saved it. And the adrenaline that had been holding me together for 24 hours finally, catastrophically abandoned me. It started in my knees, a tremble. It moved up, into my hands, until the metal railing felt like it was vibrating. My breath hitched, the city lights below me, all those millions of windows, blurred and swam. I couldn't breathe. The air was too thin up here. The concrete walls of the balcony felt like they were shrinking. The glass door behind me sealing me out, sealing me into this tiny, windswept box. I was gonna die. Not from a bullet, not from the Woojin Circle, but right here, from my own heart hammering itself to pieces inside my chest. Juniper? His voice cut through the panic. He was at the door, watching me. He'd finished his call. He wasn't alarmed. He was diagnosing. He saw the shaking, the white-knuckled grip, the ragged breathing. It's the height, I managed to gasp, a stupid lie. No, it's not, he said flatly. He stepped onto the balcony, took my arm in a grip that was neither gentle nor rough, but absolute. It's the crash. It's late. Come inside. He didn't guide me. He steered me. Back into the sterile living room, past the white couches, away from Nori's closed bedroom door. He didn't stop until we were in a part of the apartment I hadn't seen, a small room off the main hall. It was a study, but it was dominated by a single massive object, a grand piano, its black lacquer lid closed, gleaming under a single recessed light. It was the only thing in the entire apartment that felt human, that felt warm. He nodded toward the violin case still clutched in my other hand. I realized I'd been dragging it with me from room to room like a security blanket. You play, he stated. It wasn't a question. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The panic was still there, a cold animal clawing at my lungs. And then play, he commanded, his voice quiet. I looked at him, confused. He just waited. It was an order, or maybe a prescription. My fingers were stiff, still trembling. I set the case on a leather chair. I fumbled with the latches. The worn velvet interior smelled like rosin and old wood. The only familiar scent in this entire alien world. I lifted the violin. It felt light, fragile, a piece of tinder in a steel trap. I hadn't played, not really, not in months, just scales and exercises in the apartment, quiet, muffled, so the neighbors wouldn't complain. I put the instrument to my chin. My bow hand was shaking. I drew it across the strings. The sound was awful. A raw, scraping, discordant shriek, the sound of my own nerves, amplified. I flinched, my eyes squeezing shut. Again, he said. I took a ragged breath. I tried again. This time I forced my arm to move, to pull the note from the wood. It was a long, low C, mournful. It hung in the silent, acoustically perfect room. Then I played. I didn't play for him. I played for the laundromat. I played for the smell of bleach and the humming dryers. I played for the terror of Halcyon Avenue, for the thump of the contained explosion, for the cold dread of Nori's whispered translations. I played the fear, the anger, the exhaustion. It was a raw, frantic, unpolished sound. It was the sound of a girl running out of time. I didn't know how long I played. I lost myself in it. My arm ached, my fingers burned, and the panic in my chest finally began to loosen its grip, untangling itself and pouring out through the strings. When the last note faded, the silence that fell was profound. It was heavier than before. My arm dropped to my side, the bow hanging limp. I was breathing hard, but I could breathe. I opened my eyes. He hadn't moved. He was standing exactly where I'd left him, by the piano. His hand was resting flat on the polished lid. He hadn't been listening. He'd been feeling it, as if he were measuring the rhythm of my heart through the vibrating wood. His eyes were locked on me, that intense, calculating gaze, but the coldness was gone, burned away by the friction of the music. What was left was something raw, something I hadn't seen before. "Thank you," he said. The words were clumsy, gruff. He wasn't talking about the music. He was talking about the night before, his life. The awkwardness of it, the inadequacy of the words broke the spell. I became aware of the room again, of him. He was closer than I thought. Only a few feet separated us, close enough that I could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the exhaustion in his eyes. We just stood there, breathing in the silence, the music still hanging in the air between us like dust motes. My gaze dropped to the hand he had on the piano, and then to the one at his side. Just peeking out from the cuff of his expensive white shirt was a scar, a thin, white line against the tan of his wrist. I don't know why I did it. The music had stripped away my defenses, left me raw before I could think. I took a step forward. I reached out. My fingers didn't just brush it. I laid my fingertips on it. The skin was smooth, old. He didn't flinch. He just went perfectly, terribly still. "What's this?" I whispered. His eyes dropped to my hand, then back to my face. His voice, when he spoke, was a low rasp. "State Reform Collegium, West Sector." He said it like a file number. I was 16. You learn to be fast, or you learn to bleed. It wasn't a confession. It was a data point, a single, hard fact from a life I couldn't imagine. He had given me a piece of himself, a trade for the piece I had just given him with my violin. The space between us felt charged, dangerous. This was a different kind of tension. It wasn't fear. It was something else. He lifted his free hand. Slowly, he didn't touch my face. Not yet. He just brushed the back of his knuckles against my jawline, where a strand of damp hair was stuck to my skin. His touch was rough, calloused, but it sent a jolt straight down my spine. It was a question. I knew I should step back. I knew I should run. This was a monster, a killer, a man who lived in a world of violence and shadows. But I didn't. I leaned into the touch, just a fraction. It was all the answer he needed. He didn't crush me against him. It wasn't a passionate, desperate lunge. It was a decision, a strategic advance. He stepped into my space, his other hand leaving the piano, and cupped my face. And then he kissed me. It was slow, deliberate. It was a kiss of profound, calculated control. It wasn't soft. His lips were firm, demanding, tasting me like he was trying to learn a secret. It was the kiss of a man who hadn't been gentle in his entire life and wasn't about to start now. It was overwhelming. My violin bow clattered to the floor. My free hand, the one that wasn't holding the violin, came up. I gripped his wrist, then his shoulder, my fingers digging into the fine wool of his suit. I felt his other hand slide from my face, down my neck, and come to rest on the small of my back. It was large, warm, and spread wide, a brand against the thin fabric of my shirt. He pulled me closer, not hard, but with an undeniable, possessive strength. I responded, surprising myself. I wasn't a victim here. I was a participant. My hand slid from his shoulder, up, around his neck, my fingers tangling in his hair. I pulled him down, deepening the kiss, meeting his demand with my own. We broke apart, but not by much. We were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against mine. His eyes were closed, the city lights streaming in from the hall cut the dark room into silver and black bars. We were hidden in the shadows. The only sounds were our hearts, hammering a frantic, asynchronous rhythm. He pulled back half in step, his hands still framing my face. His eyes were open now, and they were dark, molten. "I'm not gentle, Juniper," he whispered. It was a warning, a final chance to escape. "I want this to be right, for you." He thought I was fragile. He thought I was the girl from the laundromat, the girl with the panic attack. He was wrong. I found a sudden, shocking well of strength. "I can make my own decisions, Adrian." A flicker of that almost smile. It was approval. He leaned in, kissed me once more, a hard, brief promise. Then he reached down, took the violin from my limp hand, and carefully, reverently, set it on the piano, next to my fallen bow. He turned back. He didn't touch my face again. He just took my hand. His grip was warm, solid. He didn't say a word. He just led me out of the dark music room, past the silver bars of light from the city, and toward the hallway. I heard the quiet, electronic snick of the bedroom door as he pushed it open. He drew me inside. The door clicked shut behind us, plunging the world into a soft, quiet dark. I watched, in my mind, as the camera panned away, lingering on a faceless, abstract painting on the hallway wall. There was no sound, just the hum of the building, the faint, distant sound of a siren, and then silence. The morning was aggressively bright. The sun, reflecting off the harbor, filled the white apartment with a blinding, sterile light. I was in the kitchen, dressed in the same clothes as yesterday. They felt thin, lived in. I was pouring a cup of coffee I'd found in the gleaming, untouched machine. My hands were steady. He walked in, and he was already in a fresh suit, dark gray, crisp white shirt. He was the king back on his throne. The night, the music, the scar it might never have happened. His men, Corso's replacement, were back, standing by the elevators, speaking in low tones. He walked to the coffee machine. I stepped aside to let him pass. And as he did, his fingers deliberately brushed mine as he reached for a mug. It was a tiny, electric touch. It shot up my arm, a private signal in a public room. Our eyes met. Just for a second, it was a silent, shared secret. Everything had changed. He wasn't just my protector. I wasn't just his debt. We were something else. "Good morning, Mommy." Nori padded into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes, her hair a wild mess. She was clutching a stuffed bear someone must have given her. "Hey, Bug," I said, my voice thick. I cleared my throat. "Did you sleep okay?" She nodded, looking at me, then at Adrian, who was silently stirring his coffee, his back to us. She looked back at me, a slow 9-year-old smile spreading across her face. She padded over and leaned into my side, her voice a conspiratorial whisper only I could hear. "Mommy's music sounds happier than last night?" My face bloomed with heat. I looked over her head. Adrian had paused, his spoon halfway to the cup. He'd heard her. He turned. Slowly. He looked at Nori and then at me. And this time, it wasn't a flicker. It wasn't a twitch. Adrian Volterra looked at me, and he smiled. That smile, that brief, impossible smile he'd given me over Nori's head, it lasted exactly 10 minutes. The bubble of our fragile, strange new domesticity, the coffee, the shared secret burst when Sal, the tech guy, came striding in, his face grim. "The decoy convoy just went dark," Sal said, his voice low, ignoring Nori and me. Adrian was instantly, terrifyingly, the man from the penthouse again. The warmth vanished, replaced by Arctic cold. "Where?" "Sector 4. They hit the bait, just like we planned." "Hit how?" "Not gunfire," Sal said, tapping his tablet. "Spikes, automated, deployed from a sewer grate. They blew all 4 tires. The team is pinned, but the hostiles aren't engaging." Adrian stared at the tablet. "They're not trying to kill them." "No, sir, they wanted the car intact. They wanted the occupants alive. They wanted you." The "you" hung in the air. The trap we set had worked, but it confirmed the worst. They weren't just trying to kill him anymore. They wanted a capture. My stomach turned to ice. What was worse than being killed by the Woojin circle being taken by them? While Adrian and Sal went into a low, intense strategy session, my focus was Nori, the tutor, a mild-mannered woman named Miss. Albright was due for her first online session at 10 a.m. It was the normalcy Adrian had promised. I set Nori up at the white lacquer desk in her room, the laptop gleaming. "Okay, Bug, Miss. Albright is going to be on in 5 minutes. Just be yourself." "She's going to teach me math," Nori said, sounding resigned. "And it'll be great." I checked the settings. The laptop was new, top of the line. Sal had swept it, he'd assured me. It was clean. Nori started her session. I left the door ajar, listening to the pleasantries, the sound of a 9-year-old struggling with fractions. It was so painfully normal, it almost made me cry. I was in the kitchen, trying to find something Nori would eat for lunch, when Adrian's team got another alert, one of the guards a man I recognized. Silas Peregrine, older, with kind eyes, hurried over to Sal. "My secure phone's acting up," Silas said, sounding worried. "It's pushing an update I didn't authorize." Sal grabbed the device. His fingers flew. "Where were you connected?" "Nowhere. Just the internal Aramore network. Then it switched to the Mistral backup server." "Idiot," Sal hissed. "The Mistral is compromised." He held up the phone. On the screen was a map, but the text wasn't English. "It's Chinese," Sal said, baffled. "It looks like a schematic of the hotel, but the commands GZK Sulang." My heart stopped. I was standing frozen, a knife and an apple in my hand. "It means change password," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Both men looked at me. "Nori," I explained, my voice shaking. She taught me a few words." Sal's face went white. "They're not just in the building. They're in the system. They're spoofing our credentials, trying to lock us out of our own elevators." It was a pincer move. They had us physically pinned with the spike trap, and now they were coming for us digitally. As Sal ran to Adrian, I turned back to Nori. The normalcy felt like a paper-thin lie. I walked back to her room, and so the numerator moves over the "Miss," Albright was saying. Nori was distracted. She was leaning close to the laptop, but not at the screen, at the microphone. "Nori," I whispered from the door. She held up a finger, her eyes wide, listening intently. "Auntie June, hush." "What is it?" "The lady Miss, Albright, her microphone is making a fuzzy sound." "It's just static, Bug." "No," she shook her head. "It's not static, it's talking, underneath." My blood evaporated. I slowly walked into the room. "What talking, Nori?" "It's the maintenance men," she whispered, her eyes terrified. "Like in the kitchen at the other hotel. They're speaking Mandarin." The laptop. Sal had swept it. But what about the other end? What about the tutor? "What are they saying, Nori? Listen." She leaned in, her ear almost to the speaker. The faint, staticky sound of men speaking was barely audible. They're in the hall. Not Miss, Albright's hall. our hall. They're talking about the Zygzonisso. Xiao what? Zitzo nitzo, she repeated. It means little bird. I stared at her. Little bird. They said the little bird is in the cage. They said the swap car CHA is stopped. Now is the time for the doll Wawa. It all clicked. The doll, the little bird. It was her. It was always her. The decoy convoy wasn't for Adrian. It was to draw his forces away, to make him think they were after him. The elevator hack wasn't to trap him. It was to trap us. The tutor, the normalcy. It was the breach. They had compromised her, used her login, her audio feed to listen, to coordinate. I grabbed Nori, pulling her away from the desk. Get your shoes. Now, get your backpack. What about Miss Albright? She's not real. Nori, the lesson isn't real. It's a trap. I slammed the laptop shut and ran into the living room, dragging Nori by the hand. Adrian, I screamed. He was already in motion. The second he saw my face, he knew. They're not here for me, I yelled. They're here for her little bird. They're calling her little bird. They're in the hall now. Sal was already at the door's security panel. Sir, multiple proximity alerts. Hallway, stairwell, they've bypassed the floor lock. Silas, Adrian barked. Lockdown now. Silas Peregrine kind-eyed. Trustworthy Silas was standing by the hall, his hand on his sidearm. He looked at Adrian, he looked at me, and he didn't move. Silas, Adrian roared again. I'm sorry, boss, Silas said, his voice flat, and he drew his weapon, not at the door, at Adrian. Betrayal. It was so fast, so absolute. It stole the air from the room. Adrian didn't hesitate. He didn't ask why. He moved. Missed protocol, he yelled to Sal, and shoved me and Nori toward the kitchen. Get her out, service exit go. As he shoved us, the world went black. The missed protocol. All the lights in the apartment, the hallway, the entire floor snapped off. Emergency bolts, loud as gunshots, slammed into place. Red emergency lights bathed everything in a sickening, pulsing crimson. Go, go, Adrian yelled. I didn't look back. I grabbed Nori's hand and plunged into the kitchen, toward the service door. I could hear the sounds behind me, a grunt, the heavy thud of a body hitting a wall, a gunshot, but Adrian's orders were echoing in my head. Get her out. I slammed the bar on the service door. It opened into a narrow, concrete corridor, lit by a single, buzzing, fluorescent light, the smell of bleach and old garbage. It was the back of the building. This way, I pulled Nori. We ran. I could hear shouting behind us. The bulkhead door was sealed, but they'd get through it. We rounded a corner and almost ran into a massive, rolling laundry cart, piled high with dirty hotel linens. In, I said, my voice hoarse. What? Get in the cart. Nori, hide. I shoved her into the pile of sheets, covering her. Don't make a sound, no matter what. I put my shoulder to the cart and pushed. It was heavy, the wheels squeaking. I shoved it down the corridor toward the service elevator. I heard the bulkhead door behind us crash open. Footsteps. There, a voice yelled in English. I slammed the cart against the wall, next to the elevator, and ducked behind it, pulling Nori's backpack with me. Two men ran past, dressed in black, not even glancing at the laundry cart. They were heading for the stairwell, trying to cut us off below. I waited until their steps faded. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. Okay, I whispered to the laundry. We're okay. I looked back the way we came. The door to the apartment was open. I had to go back. I couldn't leave him. Stay here, I whispered. Don't move. I'll be right back. I crept back, my stupid violin case, which I'd again grabbed by instinct, banging against my hip. I peered around the corner. The apartment was a wreck. Furniture was overturned. The red emergency lights were still flashing, making the scene look like hell. The fight had spilled out into the parking garage. I heard it before I saw it, the sound of a car door crunching, a grunt. I ran to the elevator, the one Silas had tried to hack, and hit the button. It opened. I got in, my heart in my throat, and rode it down to the garage. The door slid open. The garage was a swirl of red brake lights and flashing alarms. I saw Adrian. He had Silas pinned against a concrete pillar. Silas's gun was on the floor, kicked 10 feet away. Adrian wasn't using his own. He was just dismantling him. It wasn't a brawl. It was a precise, brutal, and terrifyingly quiet application of force. There were civilians cowering behind other cars, and he was deliberately keeping the fight contained. He used his forearm to block a punch, twisted Silas's arm until I heard a sickening pop, and then slammed his head back against the concrete. Not hard enough to kill, just hard enough to end the conversation. Silas slumped, conscious but broken. "Why?" Adrian panted, his voice a low growl. Silas spit blood onto the floor. He looked up, his eyes filled with a strange, defiant hatred. "The NAOCD, they're the future. Adrian, you're the past. They offered me a seat." "You sold my life," Adrian said. "You sold the girl." "She was just a flag," Silas wheezed, laughing, a horrible, wet sound. "Just a marker, to get you to move, to get you angry." "You weren't selling me," Adrian said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. "You were delivering me to the Woojin circle." "They're just partners," Silas gasped. Adrian went through Silas's pockets with a practiced, rough efficiency. He pulled out a phone, a wallet, and a small, gray metallic rectangle. It looked like a high-security USB drive. "What's this?" "Nothing," Silas choked. "Just files." "The NAOCD gave you this. Your seat at the table." "It's just a ledger," Silas gasped. "Port transactions. My buy-in." Adrian pocketed the drive. "You're not a partner, Silas. You're a flag, like you said. Something they plant before they burn the field." He turned and saw me, standing by the elevator, violin case in hand, shaking. His face was hard, bruised, and streaked with someone else's blood. He looked at me, and the animal rage in his eyes softened. Just a fraction. "Juniper, Nori." "She's safe," I said, my voice trembling. "Upstairs, in a laundry cart." He nodded, grabbing Silas by the collar and hauling him to his feet. "The NAOCD," he said, more to himself than to me, his eyes on the gray ledger in his hand. "They're not just partners with the Woojin circle. They're using them." He looked back at the garage, at the compromised security, at the man who had been his trusted friend. "This isn't the NAOCD," he muttered. "This isn't the Woojin circle. They're just the street team, the real player, the one holding the Vortex seal." He was staring at the gray ledger. "The real player is still hiding. They're posing as a goddamn government agency." He shoved Silas towards Sal, who had just arrived with 2 armed guards. "Get him," Adrian ordered, "and get the ledger. I want to know who signed it." He walked toward me, wiping the blood from his chin with the back of his hand. He didn't touch me, but he stood close, a wall of heat and violence. "They're not just trying to kill me," he said, his voice low and final. "They're trying to replace me. We were in a new cage. The Aramore had been burned. We'd moved again, this time to a residential high-rise so anonymous it didn't even have a name, just a street number. It was less luxurious, all drywall and beige carpets, but Sal assured me it was a digital black hole, scrubbed from every grid. The gray ledger Silas had been carrying was sitting on the dining room table. It was a key. That's all it was. Silas's buy-in was just the handshake, Sal explained, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. He had the drive plugged into a server that looked like it belonged in a bunker. The drive isn't the ledger. It's a key that pings the host. "So find the host," Adrian said. He was standing by the window, staring at the brick wall of the building next door. He hated being boxed in. "That's the problem," Sal said. "It's not on the web. It's a closed mobile network, a data station. It moves every 12 hours, and the network ID, it's spoofing the Federal Commerce Guard. The FCG, the fake FCG, the ones who ran the docks." "They're getting sloppy," Adrian said. "If they're spoofing the FCG, they're parking near FCG assets, the port, the rail yards." He turned from the window. "Palisade Station. It's the end of the freight line. They'll be there tonight, using the station's main signal to mask their own. We can't get near it, Adrian, Sal warned. After the Aramore, they're not just looking for you, they're looking for me. My face is all over that security footage. A heavy silence fell. Adrian looked at Sal. Then he looked at me. No, I said, my voice flat. My heart started that familiar, sick hammering. Absolutely not. I'm not that. I play the violin. You worked for 2 years in the data archives at the university library, Adrian said, his voice quiet. He'd run my life through a machine. You understand file systems. You understand how to find things. That was data entry on a catalog system from 1980. Not this. I won't be sending you, he said. I'll be with you. Sal can't go. But I can't do both. I can't be the distraction and the technician. What distraction? We're contractors, he said, as if it were obvious. Data sanitation, pest control. We're the invisible people. We're going in the back. And Nori, I demanded, my voice rising. What about Nori? You're going to leave her here. Nori, he said, turning to look at her, is our ace. Nori was sitting on the beige carpet, listening. She wasn't scared. She was focused. She stays here, Adrian continued, with 2 of my best men. But Sal is going to patch her into the station's comms. The Wujin Circle is their muscle. They'll be speaking Mandarin. Nori will be our ears, from half a mile away. This was insane. It was a heist, a crazy, desperate, impossible heist. We need that master file, Adrian said, his voice dropping. We need the vortex seal. It's the only thing that proves who they are. It's the only way to stop them coming for her. He was right. He had me. He would always have me, as long as they were hunting Nori. 2 hours later, I was standing in the shadows of Palisade Station. The place smelled of rust, diesel, and wet concrete. It was cold. I was wearing a gray insulated jumpsuit that said Urban Data Management on the back. It felt stiff and foreign. My violin was back at the apartment. I felt like I'd left a lung behind. Adrian was next to me, dressed in an identical suit, holding a metal clipboard. He was no longer Adrian Volterra, the syndicate boss. He was Mike, a bored, tired, night shift manager. The transformation was terrifying. His posture was slumped. He looked annoyed. The target was a windowless black utility truck, parked in a restricted bay near the freight tracks. It had the FCG logo stenciled on the side. 2 guards, armed, stood near the back. Nori, you with me? Adrian muttered into a tiny mic on his lapel. I'm here, Zio Aide, her tiny voice whispered in my earpiece. It was the first time I'd heard her use the uncle name. My heart cracked. What do you hear? They're talking about the tracks. They're complaining. They're cold. Good, stay sharp. Adrian stepped out of the shadows. I followed, my legs feeling like wood. Hey! Adrian barked at the guards. His voice was all gravel and annoyance. Who's in charge of this rig you're throwing RF static all over the freight signals? The guards tensed, hands on their weapons. This is a restricted unit, buddy. Back off. A man in a crisp, fake FCG uniform stepped out of the back of the truck. He was older, with a military air. I'm the commander of this unit. What's the problem? You're the problem, Adrian snapped, shoving the clipboard at him. Your vortex seal system, whatever the hell that is jamming the 415 freight switching signal. The Palisade Master just called my boss, screaming. You want a 200-ton freight train to derail because it can't read a signal, be my guest. I'm just here to log the interference. He tapped his pen. I'll just note access denied, and we can all explain this to the NTSB tomorrow. It was a master stroke, a chess game. He was using the real world to threaten their fake one. The commander knew he couldn't risk a real federal inquiry into his ghost operation. This is a secure system, the commander hissed, but he was rattled. No one touches the rack. Fine by me, Adrian shrugged, but the station master wants a diagnostic. My tech. He jerked his thumb at me. Just needs to run the scanner. She doesn't even have to touch it. The commander hesitated. My earpiece crackled. June, Nori's voice was sharp. The guards, they just got a call. They're talking Litsing Fanzang Sound Lue 3Ka Trindaing, a 2-minute patrol gap. The main station patrol is checking the east platform. They're clearing out. I looked at Adrian. My scanner, I said, trying to make my voice sound as bored as his, can only sync if the main platform signal is clear. It's a 2-minute window. We do it now, or we wait for the 6 a.m. freight. The commander cursed under his breath. He looked at Adrian, he looked at me. Fine. She goes in. You. He pointed at Adrian. Stay right here, where I can see you. Whatever, Adrian grunted. Just get it done. The commander opened the back of the truck. I stepped up, my heart trying to escape my chest. The inside was hot, dark, and hummed with the sound of servers. The main server rack was in front of me. It was locked, a high-security digital keycard lock. I turned my back to the commander, who was watching Adrian. The frequency from your servers is interfering with my card, I said loudly, pretending to swipe a blank card Sal had given me. It's not reading. I heard the commander grunt in frustration. This was it. My hands were shaking. I pulled 2 things from the deep pocket of my jumpsuit, my old laminated university library card, and a tiny, silver dollar-sized neodymium magnet, pried from the guts of an old hard drive. I wasn't a spy. I was a librarian, and librarians know that magnetic locks are just simple circuits. I slid the stiff library card into the crack of the door. Right next to the lock, I felt for the latch. Then I pressed the powerful magnet right against the card, where I guessed the solenoid was. I heard it, a tiny, oily click. The lock was open. I pulled the gray ledger drive from my other pocket and plugged it into the master port. The screen above me lit up. The file system was open. It was massive. "What are you doing?" the commander snapped. "Running the diagnostic," I called out, my voice high and tight. "It's scanning for the RF leak. It takes a second to sync." I saw the file. Vortex Seal Master Ledger. My hands were so slick with sweat I could barely move the trackpad. I dragged the file to the drive's icon. A transfer bar appeared. 1 minute remaining. My earpiece. "They're coming back. June the patrol. They're early." Come on, I whispered. The transfer bar hit 100%. The drive icon flashed. But as it did, another directory caught my eye. A subfolder marked active_ops. My fingers moved on their own. I clicked it. There was only one file inside. My blood turned to ice. Opium_bay_wawa_case. PDF. Wawa. The doll? Nori? I didn't think. I dragged the file. It was small. A few kilobytes. It copied instantly. "Juniper. Now." Adrian's voice was like stone in my ear. I yanked the drive. I slammed the server rack door shut, hard. The magnetic lock re-engaged. I stepped out of the truck, holding the drive hidden in my palm. "All clean," I said, my voice amazingly steady. It was a feedback loop. I reset the inverter. "You're good to go." "About time," the commander grunted. Adrian nodded at me. We turned and walked. Not fast, just walked. 10 steps, 15, 20. A high, piercing shriek tore through the night. It wasn't the station alarm. It was a digital alert from the commander's radio. "Data breached the drive. They detected the pull," Sal's voice screamed in my earpiece. "Run!" Adrian yelled. He didn't run for the street. He grabbed my hand and yanked me left, off the platform, right toward the tracks. "Stop them!" I heard shouts behind us, the sound of weapons being chambered. A horn blared, a sound so loud it shook my bones. A wall of light was bearing down on us. The 415 freight train. "Here!" Adrian roared over the noise. He pulled me into a small, concrete utility bunker, a recess built into the retaining wall for the switching crews. We flattened ourselves against the cold, damp concrete. A wall of steel, wind and noise exploded past us, just inches from our faces. The ground vibrated so hard it felt like an earthquake. The air was sucked from my lungs, replaced with the smell of hot metal and diesel. It was deafening, blinding. And then, As quickly as it came, it was gone. Just the clack, clack, clack of the last car, fading into the night. The shouting was distant. They had lost us in the noise. It was pitch black in the utility bunker. I was pressed against him, my entire body humming with adrenaline. And then the second wave hit, the crash. "They had a file," I whispered, my voice gone. "Adrian, they had a file on her, a doll case. They wrote it down, a plan, like she was a project." My knees buckled. I started to slide down the concrete wall. Juniper? He was in front of me, crouching in the dark. I couldn't see his face, just his silhouette. I was shaking so hard my teeth were chattering. I can't breathe." "Yes, you can." His hands clamped down on my shoulders. His grip was iron. "Breathe with me, now, in." He took a slow, deliberate breath. I heard it. Out. I was sobbing, but I did it. I matched him, a ragged, broken gasp. Again, in. We breathed, together. In the dark, smelling of rust and fear. My shaking didn't stop, but it slowed. My lungs, which had felt like they were full of wet cement, finally inflated. "You were good," he said, his voice a low rumble. "The library card, that was smart." "I was terrified," I whispered. "So was I," he admitted. That single admission that he could be scared hit me harder than the panic. We just stayed there, him crouching, me on the gravel floor, our breath slowing. This wasn't the music room. This wasn't a slow, calculated seduction. This was raw. This was survival. I was the one who moved. I reached out in the dark and grabbed the front of his jumpsuit. I pulled myself up, and I kissed him. It wasn't slow. It wasn't controlled. It was desperate. And it was hard. It was a validation. We are alive. It tasted of salt and the metallic tang of fear. It was a promise. His hand came up, not to my face, but tangled in my hair, his grip tight, pulling me in. It was a kiss that sealed a new, darker bargain. We weren't just protector and victim, we were partners. We broke apart, breathing hard, in the faint light from the rail yard. I saw his eyes. They were dark, and they were full of a new, dangerous respect. When we got back to the apartment, Nori was sitting on the couch. She hadn't been crying, she'd been waiting. When she saw us, she just nodded. Sal was already tearing the file apart. "Adrian, my God!" While Sal worked, Nori just looked at Adrian. She wasn't intimidated by him. Not anymore. "You use hand codes," she said. Adrian, who'd been stripping off his jumpsuit, paused. "What?" "In the garage, with Silas," she said. "I saw it on the camera. You did this." She held up her hand, fingers splayed, then closed it into a tight fist. "And this?" She tapped 2 fingers to her temple. Adrian stared at her. "That's tactical protocol. Cease and observe." "Teach me," Nori said. It wasn't a question. He looked at this 9-year-old girl who had just been the eyes and ears of his most critical operation. He didn't see a child. He saw an asset, an apprentice. He slowly crouched in front of her. He held up his hand, palm out, and swept it down. "All clear," he said. She mimicked him perfectly. A broken, strange, terrifying family, being pieced together in the beige carpeted safe house. "Adrian," Sal's voice was sharp, "you need to see this." We all looked at the laptop screen. Sal had the master ledger open. "The signature," Adrian said. "The vortex seal." "It's not the FCG," Sal said. "It's not the NAOCD. It's not MIBX." He projected the signature onto the wall. It was an official-looking logo, a shield and a lighthouse. "Coastal Port Sentinel." "CPS," Adrian said. His voice was dead flat. "The Port Authority," I asked, confused. They're a public agency." "They're a phantom," Adrian said, his eyes drilling into the logo. "A shell corporation created by the new city charter 2 years ago. They have all the authority of a government agency but zero public oversight." He looked at me. The last piece clicked into place. "They're not just a gang. Juniper, they're a fake government. They're using the Woojin Circle as their muscle and the NAOCD as their legitimate business front. We hadn't just stolen a file from a rival. We had just declared war on an organization that wore the city's shield, the Coastal Port Sentinel, a phantom government. The revelation sat in the middle of that beige apartment like an unexploded bomb. The adrenaline from the heist at Palisade Station had faded, leaving behind a cold, hard dread. We hadn't just poked a rival. We had punched a shadow organization that had the city's shield on its armor. Nori was in the other room, debriefing with Sal, showing him the hand signals Adrian had taught her. The sound of her quiet, serious voice was a stark contrast to the storm brewing in the living room. Adrian was silent. He'd been staring at the CPS logo on the laptop screen for 10 minutes, his face carved from granite. When he finally turned to me, his eyes were dark, resolved, and held a coldness that terrified me. "It's over," he said. "What?" I asked, my voice small. "What's over? We have the ledger. We won." "No," he said, shutting the laptop. "We identified an enemy we can't fight. Not like this. This isn't the Woojin Circle. This isn't a street war. This is a ghost that uses the city's payroll. They have unlimited resources. They have plausible deniability. And they have a file with your niece's name on it." He walked over to me. His face was a mask of control, but I could see the tension in his jaw. "Sal has a route," he said, his voice flat. "An exit, a clean one. It leaves tonight, a private jet out of a county airstrip north to Montreal. From there, new names, new passports, a life, in Europe, Geneva, somewhere safe, somewhere they can't touch you." I stared at him. "You mean us? Somewhere they can't touch us." His eyes didn't waver. "Somewhere they can't touch you," he repeated, his voice clipping the word. "You and Nori." The floor dropped out from under me. "And you—" "I am the target," Marhi said, as if explaining a simple equation. "They want the vortex seal back. They want me gone. As long as I'm here, they'll hunt. As long as you're with me, you're the leverage." You're staying," I whispered. It wasn't a question, it was a dawning horror. "I am the bait," he said. "I'll draw them south, toward the Atlantic routes. I'll make them think I'm running. It will give you a 48-hour window. It's the only way." "No." The word was out of my mouth before I'd even formed the thought. "This is not a negotiation, Juniper." "No," I said again, louder this time. I stepped away from him, the panic and adrenaline being replaced by a sudden, white-hot flash of anger. "I am not your package to be shipped. I am not your liability to be managed. I am not running." "This is not running, this is survival." His voice rose for the first time, the controlled mask cracking. "This is the only way to keep her safe. Did you not see the file? Opium_Bay_Wawa_case. They have a plan for her. You will get on that plane." "And what happens then?" I shot back, my whole body shaking. "We live in Geneva, looking over our shoulder every single day for the rest of our lives. We wait for the day when you stop answering the phone. We wait for them to finish with you and decide to clean up the loose ends. That's not a life. Adrian, that's a different cage." "It is life," he roared, taking a step toward me. "It's breathing. It's Nori going to a real school. It's what you said you wanted." "What I want is for it to be over," I screamed. "Running isn't protection. It never has been. Facing them is the only way this ends." "You can't face a phantom," he yelled. "You can't fight a shadow. I am trying to save you." "And I am trying to save you, you arrogant, controlling bastard." The words hung in the air, electric and toxic. We were both breathing hard, 2 feet apart, two opposing forces locked in a stalemate. We weren't just arguing about a plan. We were arguing about who we were. He was a man who managed risk by cutting away the parts he couldn't control. I was a woman who had spent her entire life running and was finally, desperately, trying to stand still. The door to the living room opened. We both turned. Nori was standing there. She wasn't crying. Her face was pale, serious. She walked silently, not to me, not to him, but to the coffee table. She placed 3 pieces of paper on the glass, side by side. They were her drawings. The first was a boat on a dark, choppy sea. The second was a paper crane, like the ones in the restaurant in her old neighborhood. The third was a small, simple house with a crooked chimney and a big red door. She looked up at me, then at Adrian. "It doesn't matter," she whispered, her small voice cutting through all our anger. "The boat, or the plane, or the house." She pointed to the red door. "Home is just where we go, together." My anger evaporated, leaving me hollow. She had heard it all. She had heard us tearing our new, fragile home apart. I knelt and pulled her into my arms, burying my face in her hair. "I'm sorry, Bug, I'm so sorry." I looked up at Adrian, who was staring at the drawings, his face unreadable. "I can't run," I said, my voice thick. I told him about Kevin, about my brother, about the years I spent running from his debts, his dealers, his rages, about changing apartments every 6 months, about Nori learning to pack her go bag before she could read. "Nah, every time," I said, my voice gaining a raw, iron strength. "Every time I ran, it got worse, because they knew I would run. Running is an invitation. It tells them they've won." I held Nori tighter. "I am done running. I will not teach her this. I will not." Adrian didn't move for a long time. He just stared at the drawing of the little house, at the us. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached for his wrist. He unclasped his watch. It was a heavy, obscenely expensive-looking piece of dark metal. It wasn't just a timepiece. It was his armor, his symbol. He set it down on the table, next to the drawings. The click of the metal on the glass was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. It was a surrender. "I'm not running on Power's time anymore," he said, his voice a low rasp. "I'm not cutting away the risk." He was looking at me. "I'm not leaving you." He knelt in front of Nori and me. He didn't pull us into a desperate, crushing hug. He just held us. His arms came around both of us, a solid, steady wall. He tucked my head under his chin. I could feel the steady, slow beat of his heart against my ear. It was the same rhythm from the utility bunker. I let go, my hands gripping the back of his shirt. He pulled back just enough to look at me. His eyes were clear, the conflict gone. He leaned in, and his lips touched mine. It wasn't the desperate, claiming kiss from the music room. It wasn't the raw, animal survival of the rail yard. It was a promise. It was warm and steady, and it held no fire. It was just contact, a seal, a quiet, unbreakable vow. We are in this together. "Okay," he said, standing up, pulling me with him. "No running." He looked at the laptop. The calculating, strategic light was back in his eyes, but the coldness was gone. "Then we change the game," he said. "We don't fight them in the shadows. We drag them into the light." "How?" I asked. "Commissioner Thorne," he said. "The Office of Urban Safety. He's the real deal. He's the only clean man in the city." "You want to give him the ledger?" "I want to use him," Adrian corrected. "We'll set up a meeting. Thorne, a few journalists he trusts, the independent ones. We give them the ledger. We give them the CPS. We give them everything." It was a bold, insane plan. It was giving away all his leverage. "But there's a condition," he said, his eyes locking with mine. "My condition for Thorne and for myself." "What?" "The Volterra Syndicate," he said, "pulls out of the port, completely. All smuggling routes, all gray shipments, all of it." I was stunned. "But that's your empire." "It's an empire I can't protect," he said. "It's an empire that put a target on her back. It's time to step down so I can step up, legally." He looked at me, and his face was open, vulnerable, in a way that scared me more than his anger ever had. "I'm more afraid of losing you, Juniper," he confessed, his voice low, "than I am of losing my empire." The words hit me, stealing my breath. I reached out, my fingers tracing the scar on his wrist, the one from the Reform Collegium. "Then, let's build something we're not afraid to lose," I whispered. "A normal life." He smiled, a real, small, tired smile. "Normal. I don't know if I'll be any good at it." "You'll learn," I said. From the kitchen, Nori, who'd been listening to all of this, called out. She was holding a small Italian dictionary Sal had found for her. Zoade, she tested the name. Adrian turned, surprised. What? Piccola? Come, she said, reading from the book, her pronunciation terrible and perfect. Andiamo a casa. Let's go home. Adrian looked at Nori. He looked at me. He looked at the drawings on the table. Yeah, he said, his voice thick. Let's go home. The Meridian building wasn't a fortress. It was a glass box in the sky, neutral ground, and I hated it. The air in the 40th floor conference suite was stale, smelling of old coffee and high-stakes fear. It was just us, me, Adrian and Sal on one side of the polished mahogany table. On the other sat Commissioner Thorne, the head of the real Office of Urban Safety, a man with a face like worn leather and eyes that had seen too much. Flanking him were two journalists, not from the big networks, but from a scrappy, independent online outfit that couldn't be bought or bullied. Rourke, the woman, had eyes that missed nothing. This was it. The plan we'd made in that beige apartment, no running. The file you're looking at, Sal said, his voice steady, his hands flying over a laptop connected to a secure projector, is the Gray Ledger. It's the full transaction history of the Coastal Port Sentinel. Rourke leaned forward. CPS is a city agency. Kid, we've tried to get their books for a year. That's because they're not an agency, Adrian said, his voice a low rumble. They're a front. And this, Sal clicked a key, is their signature, the Vortex seal. It's on every illegal shipment, every kickback, every transaction with the Woojin Circle. Rourke's eyes widened. She knew that name. They're a fake government, I heard myself say. My voice was small, but it cut through the hum of the projector. They've been laundering money for the NAOCD and using the Woojin Circle as their enforcers. Thorne looked at me. And how, Miss Vale, do you fit into this? Before I could answer, the lights in the room snapped off. It wasn't a flicker. It was a death. The entire suite, the entire city outside the windows, plunged into an oppressive, inky blackness. The only light came from the emergency exit signs and the glow of our cell phones as they lit up in our hands. What the hell, Rourke muttered, holding her phone up. A city-wide outage, the entire downtown core is dark. Adrian was already on his feet, moving toward the window, a black silhouette against the pinprick lights of the distant suburbs. They're moving, he said. Sal, get the data on a hardline push. On it, but Adrian, Sal held up his phone. It's already started. The counter move. Rourke's phone buzzed, and then Thorne's. I'm getting a push alert, she said, her voice sharp with suspicion. She read from her screen. Well, Commissioner, this is timely. Volterra's mall sings for immunity. An anonymous source claims Volterra is using a disturbed civilian, Juniper Vale, to frame the CPS in a desperate power grab. She looked at me, her sharp eyes filled with new, cold doubt. It's a smear. It's painting you as a liar. Volterra's property. My stomach turned to acid. The old me, the laundromat girl, would have crumpled. I would have dissolved into apologies and tears. But I wasn't her. Not anymore. I stood up. My knees were shaking, but I locked them. I looked right at Rourke, her face lit only by the glow of her phone. My name, I said, my voice trembling but gaining strength with every word, is Juniper Vale. I'm not a mall. I don't belong to anyone. I work the graveyard shift at the Spin and Dry on Halcyon Avenue. I told them everything. The rain, the neon light, the two men speaking Mandarin, the black battery layer. My 9-year-old niece, I said, my voice cracking but not breaking, understood them. She saved his life, and for that, the Woojin Circle and the CPS put a file on her, a plan. They call her the little bird. They call her the doll. They tried to trade for her, to buy her from her addicted father. They tried to take her. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the cold, dark table. I don't care about the port. I don't care about immunity. I am here because they tried to take my child, and this. I pointed to Sal's laptop. is the proof. That's my story. Go ahead and print it." The silence that followed was absolute. It was broken by the ping of the elevator, followed by shouting in the hall. Sal was looking at his tablet, which was running on battery. "Adrian, they're here. Garage level. 4 black sedans, no plates. It's the Woojin Circle. They're not waiting." "They're cleaning house," Adrian said. He turned to Thorne. "Commissioner, you wanted proof you're about to get it? They're here to silence you, me and those journalists. Sal, get that data live. Now, push it to the square. Rourke, get your feed running." He pulled me toward the door. Nori was outside with one of Adrian's men, her small hand clutching her backpack. Adrian pulled her to him, checking the small, two-way radio clipped to her jacket. "Stay with her," he said to me, "no matter what." The garage was a nightmare. The emergency lights cast long, terrifying red shadows, punctuated by the high beams of the Woojin Circle's cars, which had formed a blockade. Civilians, the people from our floor, were screaming, trapped between the dead elevators and the gunmen. "Stay down," Adrian shoved me, Nori and Rourke behind a massive concrete pillar. "Don't move." The Woojin weren't just here for us. They were moving on Thorne's people, on the journalists. This was a purge. The air exploded with noise, but Adrian wasn't just returning fire. I watched him. He was using the cover of a sedan, firing with terrifying precision. He wasn't aiming at the men. He was aiming at the concrete floor in front of them, at the engine blocks, at the tires. He was drawing their attention, managing the field. He was deliberately, desperately, trying to keep the civilians out of the crossfire. "Get them to the stairs," he roared at Thorne's guards. Nori was pressed against the pillar, her eyes wide, her head tilted. She was listening to the Mandarin echoing off the concrete. She grabbed her radio. Her hand was shaking, but her voice was clear. "Zio ad Zio aid. Listen," she yelled into the mic. They're saying LCZOB BA1 LA. I cha. The boss isn't coming by car. The target is changing. They're going to the tunnel, the pedestrian tunnel." Adrian, pinned behind a car, looked at us. He understood instantly. They were flanking us, cutting off the only street exit. "Juniper," he yelled. "The stairs, get them out." I looked at the panicking group of civilians, huddling by the dead elevators. The journalist, Rourke, was frozen. I grabbed her arm. "This way, the stairs now." My voice. It wasn't a scream. It was a command. It was the voice of a woman who had faced down her addict brother a dozen times. It was the voice that said, "This is over." It worked. They moved. I shoved them, herding them like lost sheep toward the glowing red exit sign. "Nori, hold my belt. Don't let go." I pushed the heavy stairwell door open and shoved the civilians through. I looked back. Just for a second. Adrian was trapped. Our move had drawn the fire. 3 gunmen had broken off, pinning him between a black sedan and the glass-walled parking office. He was out of cover. He didn't have a clean shot. They did. I watched. My heart stopped as he grabbed the red fire extinguisher from the wall. He didn't hesitate. He pulled the pin, braced himself, and aimed. He didn't spray them. He sprayed the air. A massive, suffocating white cloud of CO2 vapor exploded between them, instantly obscuring everything. The gunmen, blinded, choked. They fired wildly into the white mist. And he moved. He moved into the cloud. I saw a shape, fast and brutal. A heavy thud as he used the steel extinguisher itself as a shield, then a weapon. A crack as he disarmed the first man. The second man turned, blinded, and Adrian was already on him. A clean, sharp twist. The gun clattered to the pavement. The third man stumbled back, wiping his eyes, and Adrian just stopped him. A single, precise, economical motion. It was over. The stairwell door was still open. Nori was clinging to my belt. I was standing in the doorway, panting. Adrian was across the garage, covered in white chemical dust, his chest heaving. He looked at me. A stray shot from one of the last, fleeing Woojin cars hit the glass booth between us. The reinforced glass didn't shatter, it spiderwebbed, 1,000 cracks appearing in an instant. He was on one side of that broken glass. I was on the other. Our eyes met. It wasn't a kiss. It was more intimate, and it was a silent, frantic, desperate question and answer. Are you hit? No. Are you? No. We are alive. I see you. It was a vow, sealed in gunfire and broken glass, held for one single, impossible second. Then the world changed. Outside, in the public square, the power was still dead, but the massive jumbotron on the side of the Meridian Tower, it was on. It was running on a backup generator. Sal had done it. Commissioner Thorne was on the steps of the building, a bullhorn in his hand. And on that 50-foot screen, for the entire city to see the gray ledger. Bank transfers, coded account numbers, the logo of the Coastal Port Sentinel right next to the Woojin Circle's emblem, and then the final, devastating blow, opium_bay_wawa_case, PDF. The city saw it. The real press, the big networks were arriving, their broadcast vans lighting up the square. And we saw them. The panic. The men in official CPS uniforms, the ones who hadn't been with Thorne, the ones who had been forming a containment perimeter, they just stopped. They looked at the screen. They looked at the arriving media. And they ran. They scrambled for their cars, yelling into their radios, shoving civilians out of the way. The mask didn't just fall. It was ripped off, live, in front of the entire city. The fake government, the phantom agency, had just exposed itself. The adrenaline left me all at once. I was in a concrete utility room, a makeshift medical bay. I was shaking. I couldn't stop. My entire body was vibrating, a string pulled too tight. Nori was asleep on a gurney, a blanket pulled over her, one of Thorne's guards standing stone-faced at the door. Adrian walked in. He'd washed the white dust from his face. A fresh, raw cut was bleeding slowly over his eye. He just looked at me. I was sitting on a metal stool, wrapped in a coarse gray blanket. "Are you shaking?" he asked. His voice was rough, torn. I looked at my hands, which were clenched in my lap. They were vibrating so fast they were a blur. I nodded, my teeth chattering. Yes. I looked up at him, at the cut, at the exhaustion in his eyes. "But I'm not alone," I whispered. He closed his eyes, a breath of pure relief leaving him. He didn't sit. He just walked over to me until his knees were almost touching mine. He bent down. He put his forehead against mine. His skin was warm. He smelled like smoke, cold air, and the sharp, metallic tang of the extinguisher. He reached out and took my right hand. He didn't just hold it. He uncurled my clenched, white-knuckled fist and threaded his fingers through mine. His grip was solid, an anchor in an earthquake. I closed my eyes. The world simplified. It shrank to the smell of his skin and the feeling of his hand, solid and warm, stopping the shaking. I felt his pulse, steady and strong, against my palm. I felt my own, frantic, hummingbird heartbeat, which had been trying to beat its way out of my chest, begin to listen. It slowed, one beat, then another. It began to match his. We just stood there, breathing in, out. The screaming in my head, the gunfire, the broken glass, it all faded. It was replaced by a single, low, clear note. The sound of my violin, deep and resonant in the quiet, finally safe. The aftermath was not quiet. It was a roar. The Meridian Tower Jumbotron had acted like a lit match on a gas leak. Port Callaway didn't just wake up, it exploded. The Coastal Port Sentinel, the phantom agency, had its mask ripped off in front of God and everyone, and the city was screaming for blood. Commissioner Thorne, true to his word, held the line. The OUS, backed by the good internal faction of the TSSCU, began a citywide sweep. Indictments came down from the prosecutor's office, the real one like rain. In the middle of this political firestorm, Adrian did the unthinkable. He called a press conference. He didn't hide. He didn't release a statement. He stood in the lobby of the Mistral the first time he'd been back in front of 100 cameras, and he talked. I stood just off stage, Nori's hand in mine, watching him on the monitor, and he was in a dark suit, no tie. The cut over his eye from the garage fight was a stark, angry red. "Effective today," he said, his voice that low, familiar rumble silencing the room. "The Volterra organization is divesting from all maritime and port-related holdings. All assets will be transferred into a new, public-facing body, the Aegis Maritime and Cultural Trust. A legal front, a shell, but this time, a shell designed to let the light in, not keep it out. Are you reforming, Mr. Volterra?" Rourke, the journalist from the Meridian, yelled from the front row. "I'm liquidating," he corrected. "The port is no longer my business. My business." He glanced, just for a fraction of a second, toward the monitor, toward me, "is building something that can't be stolen." The headlines were vicious. The city was torn. Half the papers screamed Volterra's power play, claiming it was a PR stunt, a strategic whitewashing. The other half cautiously whispered about the Volterra Reformation, painting him as some kind of dark knight, the one who had exposed the real corruption. Adrian didn't read any of it. He just accepted the suspicion as the price of admission to this new, legitimate world. While the city was busy dissecting him, I was quietly rebuilding my own. Thorne, true to his word, fast-tracked my case. I sat in a quiet wood-paneled office with a lawyer from the OUS, not one of Adrian's men, but a city prosecutor. I signed the final, permanent order of guardianship for Nori. My hand didn't shake. The paper was crisp, official. It wasn't a shackle. It was a shield. The weakest point in my life. The fear that Kevin would come back, that Nori could be taken, it was gone. The key had turned to steel. The Woojin Circle, their leadership cut off at the knees by the CPS collapse, fractured. They were no longer an army. They were just ghosts. But as Sal warned us, ghosts can still pull triggers. Their core, the hardline loyalists, had vanished. Sal's intel pointed to one shadow, a single leader who had slipped the net, a figure known only by the code name Kilin, the mythical beast, a creature of judgment. But for the first time, the threat felt distant. The immediate suffocating fear was gone, replaced by the noise of life. We moved, not to a safe house, not to a fortress. We moved into a brownstone Adrian had owned for years through a shell company, a 4-story building in a quiet, tree-lined district. It had hardwood floors that creaked, a small, walled-in garden, and bedrooms with actual, non-bulletproof windows. It was terrifying. It was normal. Nori's normal started a week later. She wasn't a secret anymore. She was enrolled under her real name at the Little Harbor Academy, a private school known for its international student body. I walked her to the gate that first day. She was in a small, navy blue uniform, her backpack almost as big as she was. "What if they don't like me?" she whispered, clutching my hand. "Bug, you speak 3 languages and can spot a tactical trap from a mile away. You'll be fine." I whispered back. She didn't look convinced. Then, a group of kids by the gate started arguing in Spanish. One of them, a little boy, was trying to explain a video game to a girl who only spoke Korean. Nori watched them for a second. She let go of my hand, walked over, and said something in Spanish to the boy, then turned and said something in Korean to the girl. In 30 seconds, all 3 of them were laughing. Nori looked back at me and waved. She was a diplomat, a decoder. She wasn't just safe, she was thriving. My own normal was harder to find. I was the mall, the disturbed civilian. I was, in the city's eyes, a footnote in Adrian Volterra's story. One afternoon, I was walking past the old city music hall. There was a sign printed on cheap paper and taped to the glass Port Callaway Community Orchestra. Open auditions, violins needed. My heart did a stupid, painful leap. I went home. I picked up my violin, the one I'd set down after the kiss in the Aramore. I hadn't touched it since. I went back. The room was small, dusty, and filled with people who were too old, too young, or too busy to be professionals. The conductor, a weary-looking man in a cardigan, just pointed. "You're late. Seat in the back. We're on Beethoven, page 4. I sat. I put the music on the stand. My hands were sweating. This wasn't a performance. It wasn't a plea for my life. It was just music. The conductor tapped his baton. 1, 2. I drew my bow. And for the first time, I wasn't playing my fear. I wasn't playing my anger. I was under lights that weren't red emergency strobes or cheap neon signs. They were warm, yellow stage lights, and I was not alone. The biggest change, however, was Adrian. He was a man adrift, his empire. The thing that had defined him was being dismantled, piece by piece, by lawyers. His days were no longer filled with strategy and danger. They were filled with meetings and quiet. He was home, in the brownstone, a lot. One morning, I came downstairs to find him in the kitchen, staring at the high-end Italian espresso machine as if it were a complex explosive device. "It's blinking," he said, sounding genuinely confused. "It needs water," I said, trying not to smile. "Right." He filled the reservoir. He ground the beans. He fumbled with the portafilter, spilling grounds on the counter. He steamed the milk, and the machine made a sound like a dying animal. After 10 minutes of intense, silent concentration, he produced 2 lattes. He slid one across the counter to me. I took a sip. It was terrible, burnt, scalding. "It's perfect," I said. He nodded, taking a drink of his own, and didn't even wince. The kitchen of the most feared man in Port Calloway had become a tiny, domestic stage. He was learning a new language, one of milk foam and burnt coffee. The old world wasn't done with him, though. One afternoon, he came home from a meeting I hadn't known about. He was wearing that suit, the dark gray one, and he looked thoughtful. The TSSCU, he said, loosening his tie. The clean faction, the ones who helped Thorne. "What about them?" They made me an offer, a consulting role, semi-public, port security advisor. I stared at him, the very people who had hunted him for a decade. "They're offering you a badge." "They're offering me a leash," he corrected. "One that looks like a podium. They want the reformed king on their side. It legitimizes them, and it neutralizes me. Are you going to take it?" "I don't know," he said. "It's a way in, a legal way in, but it's a cage." It was a truce, a path to a normal life, paved by the very agencies that had been our enemies. The door was cracked. The peace lasted for 3 beautiful, quiet, achingly normal weeks. Then the package arrived. It was a simple, white 9x12 envelope, no return address, just my name, Juniper Vale, printed in block letters. It had been delivered by a messenger, not by mail. Adrian's security team, now smaller, more focused, had swept it. It was clean, just paper. I opened it in the kitchen, while Adrian was on the phone. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a photocopy, a piece of the gray ledger, the page with the opium_bay_wawa_case file on it. Folded from this single, chilling piece of paper was a paper crane, like the one from Nori's drawing. I felt the blood drain from my face. I picked it up. It was exquisitely folded. On the underside of one wing, written in precise black ink in traditional Chinese characters, was a single line of text. "Zhengzhuzai Menku." My Mandarin wasn't good, but I knew those characters. I'd seen them in Nori's flashcards. Endgame, at the door. Adrian, who had hung up the phone, saw my face. He was at my side in an instant. He looked at the crane. He read the words. He didn't move, but the air around him went arctic. The domestic coffee-making man was gone. The boss was back. He walked to the large bay window in the living room, looking out at the quiet, tree-lined street. He saw the delivery vans, the dog walkers, the illusion of safety. "The endgame is at the door," he repeated, his voice a whisper. "Keelan." The storm wasn't over. It had just been gathering strength. He picked up his secure phone, Security protocol, black level, lower the profile. I want full 24-hour surveillance on the sublevels, the cellars, the tunnels. They're not coming from the street. They're coming from below. He hung up and looked at me. His face was a mask of cold fury. I can take Nori, I said, my voice shaking. We can go. To the airport, the exit. No. His voice was final. He walked over to me. He took the paper crane from my trembling hand and crushed it in his fist. We don't run, he said. Whatever happens, I whispered, putting my hand on his chest, on the solid, steady beat of his heart. We walk together. He nodded, covering my hand with his. Together. He looked past me, at my violin, which was sitting on its stand by the piano. A new, cold resolve settled in his eyes. They want to bring the violence to our door, he said. Fine. We'll respond, but not with their methods, with ours. What do you mean? The fundraiser, he said, an idea forming. The one you mentioned, for the victims of street violence. We're going to do it. We're going to do it now. We'll invite the entire city. Thorn, the TSSKU, the press, the old families. We'll hold it at the Orpheon Theater. We'll stand on that stage in the biggest, brightest spotlight we can find. I understood. It wasn't just a fundraiser. It was a statement. It was power, not as a weapon, but as an influence. We're not going to hide in the basement, he said, his voice raw. We're going to stand in the light and we're going to dare them to come. The Orpheon Theater was a galaxy of light. The crystal chandeliers, dimmed for so long, were blazing at full power, raining down a warm, golden light on the packed house. And it was packed. This wasn't just a fundraiser. It was a statement. The front rows were a strategic map of Port Calloway's new landscape commissioner, Thorn. His face, like carved oak, sat next to Rourke, the journalist, her pen flying. The clean brass from the TSSCU sat shoulder to shoulder with the city's old money families. It was the entire power structure of the city, brought together under one roof, under our roof. We had dared Killen to come, and we had built the most public, well-lit trap in history. I stood in the wings, my violin in my hand. It felt warm, alive, not a shield, not a life raft, just mine. The stage manager gave the cue. A tiny figure in a dark blue velvet dress walked out into the center of the massive, bright spotlight. Nori. She walked right to the microphone, adjusted it down, and didn't even tremble. Good evening, she said, her small, clear voice ringing through the hushed theater. Welcome. Then she looked at the front row, where a delegation from the Spanish consulate was sitting. Bienvenidos a todos. She turned to the other side, where the new heads of the Harbor Exchange, the ones replacing the Woojin Circle's business front, were seated. Huanyang. A wave of applause, surprised and charmed, rippled through the crowd. My little diplomat, she beamed. My auntie, Juniper Vale, is going to play for you, Nori said. She wrote this song when she was sad, but tonight, it's for everyone who needs to feel safe. She looked at me in the wings and gave me a thumbs up. I walked out, my heart so full I thought it might burst. I nodded to the conductor, raised my violin, and as Nori ran off stage, I began to play. It was the lullaby for a harbor, the melody I had hummed to myself over the roar of the dryers at the Spin and Dry, the tune I had scratched out on sheet music while Nori slept. But tonight, it wasn't a lament. The orchestra swelled behind me, and the melody wasn't sad. It was soaring. It was a promise. It was the sound of the fog lifting. I closed my eyes, and I played. Backstage, I knew Adrian was watching. He wasn't in the crowd. He was where he always was in the shadows, managing the fight. He was on his secure comms, his eyes on every entrance, every exit, coordinating with Thorne's men, who were disguised as ushers. As I played the final, swelling notes, I saw him at the side of the stage, his face tense. Sal was at his side, holding a tablet, his face pale. Adrian had just received a one-word text on his secure device, Quillen. It was followed by a coded phrase from his team in the basement, electromagnetic, stage right door, Don't step in. The endgame at the door. The paper crane. It was real. It was here. As the last note of my lullaby faded, the theater erupted, not just applause, a standing ovation. People were on their feet, the sound washing over me like a warm tide. I bowed, tears in my eyes. I walked off stage, my violin in my hand, into the shadows where Adrian was waiting. "Juniper, you were," he started, his voice thick. "Zio aid mommy." Nori came flying around the corner, her face sheet white with terror. She wasn't running to congratulate me. She was running from something. She grabbed Adrian's hand. "The door," she panted, her voice a desperate whisper. "The right door." Adrian froze, his eyes instantly hardening. "What? Nori, what about the door?" "The stagehands," she gasped, pointing to two men in black uniforms who were walking quickly down the far corridor. They weren't speaking English. They were speaking Mandarin. I heard them. "What did you hear, Piccola?" Adrian's voice was deadly calm. "They said, M.A. Kien Wei Tu Uca, catch Zeng, the magnetic field on the right side door, and T She NAYC NBAO, the substitute trigger, the same word from the first night, the car bomb." "They said," Nori's eyes were huge, "that the field is the trigger. They said it's set for you. It will pull and pop when you get near it." My blood turned to ice. It wasn't just a bomb. It was a targeted magnetic trap, designed to pull a shrapnel-filled device to him when it sensed the specific metallic signature of his sidearm, his comms, his belt buckle. He was supposed to walk out that right door with me, into the private hallway, to safety. It was a trap. Adrian didn't even blink. He looked at me. "Take Nori, go to the dressing room, lock the door." "No," I said, grabbing his arm. "Now, Juniper." He didn't raise his voice. He just commanded. But he didn't move. He held perfectly still. He was a dead man if he took one step toward that door. He looked at Sal. He didn't speak. He just used the hand signals, the ones he'd taught Nori. Fist, palm down, cease, hold, 2 fingers to his temple, observe, 1 finger pointing left, new exit, a rolling motion with his hand, gem all frequencies. Then he pointed to the right side door and made a fist, drawing a box around it. "Contain, shield?" Sal nodded, his fingers flying. He hit a key on his tablet. "Team." He spoke into his mic. "Protocol Faraday? Stage right, now. Deep in the building's infrastructure, Thorne's tech team, warned of this possibility, activated a high-density, localized magnetic shield around the bomb. They were putting a box, inside a box, around Keelan's trap. Out in the audience, the applause was dying down. A man in the 5th row, impeccably dressed, a pillar of the community, one of the new philanthropists on the Aegis Trust's guest list, looked at his watch. It was Keelan. He smiled, a thin, satisfied expression. He reached into his pocket and pressed a small, simple button, the trigger for his substitute. He pressed it. Nothing. A high-pitched, silent feedback whine, which only he could hear, hit his earpiece. The signal wasn't just jammed, it was being contained, reflected, tripling back on itself. The magnetic field had collapsed. The trap was dead. Keelan's smile vanished. He looked baffled. He pressed the button again. Nothing. The man next to him, his aide, saw the panic in his boss's eyes. He saw the security team, the real ones. The OUS men begin to stand up in the aisles. He panicked. He stood up, pulling a short, suppressed weapon from his jacket. He wasn't a strategist. He was just muscle. He aimed, not at Adrian, who was still in the shadows, but at the light. He aimed at me. It all happened in that compressed, syrupy, slow time of pure adrenaline. I saw the man stand. I saw the light glint on the metal. I saw Adrian move. He wasn't a businessman. He wasn't a foundation head. He was the man from the garage. He moved faster than I thought was humanly possible. He didn't run at the man. He ran across him, intercepting the line of fire. He shoved me so hard I fell back into the curtain, violin skittering away. He didn't stop. He used his momentum, slamming into the gunman's side, shielding me with his own body. One of his hands grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it. The other hand grabbed the barrel of the weapon, forcing it up, toward the ceiling. A series of muffled, spitting pops. The gunman grunted as Adrian used a clean, brutal joint lock, and the weapon clattered to the floor. Above us, in the heavy rigging, 3 small puffs of dust exploded from a steel beam. The audience screamed, panic. But I wasn't the girl from the laundromat. I scrambled up. I grabbed the stage manager's microphone, the one on the comms board. I hit the live switch, and my voice boomed out over the theater's PA system, over the screams. Everyone be calm. They stopped. They looked at the stage. Please, do not run. The threat is contained. Please stand and walk calmly to the exits on your left. Our security team will guide you. My voice wasn't shaking. It was clear, it was steady. The orchestra, stunned, looked at me. The conductor, a true professional, understood. He tapped his baton, and the percussionist started a low, steady drumbeat. Not music, a rhythm, a heartbeat, walk, walk, walk. The crowd, which had been a panicked mob, became people. They stood. They began to move in an orderly, fast-moving line toward the exits. In the 5th row, Killen was trying to blend in, but Commissioner Thorne and 2 of his TSSCU agents were already there. They boxed him in. "Mr. Killen," Thorne said, his voice quiet, "I believe you have something to discuss with us." The Phantom was caught, in the light, in front of everyone. The endgame at his door. The theater was empty. It was quiet. The only sound the low hum of the ghost lights. The panic was gone, replaced by the mundane cleanup. I was standing alone, center stage, where I had played. I had found my violin. It was unscratched. I heard a single set of footsteps. Adrian was standing in the wings, just watching me. The cut over his eye had faded to a pale scar. The shadows were gone from his face. He was just looking at me, not as a debt, not as a partner in a war. He just looked, and I just looked back. I was in the dressing room, the one with the old, faded red velvet walls. When he came in, he didn't say anything. He just shut the door, closing out the world. He walked over to me, put his hands on my shoulders, and just held me. I leaned my head against his chest. I could feel his heart, steady and slow, that same rhythm, thump, thump. "You're okay," he whispered into my hair. I pulled back, just enough to look at him. I put my hands on his face, my fingers tracing the scar. "We're okay." He leaned down and he kissed me. It was a long, slow, quiet kiss. It held no desperation, no survival, no claiming. It was just warmth. It was the end of the story. It was the feeling of a frayed, torn apart nerve, finally healing over. It was every promise we'd made, every fight we'd survived, all melting into a single, profound, quiet moment of peace. We broke apart, resting our foreheads together. "You're home," he whispered. "No more emergency elevators," I whispered back, my voice thick. "No more codes, no more hiding." I looked up at him. Just us, and normal. He smiled, a real, full, tired smile. "Normal," he said, "has never been this appealing." The next day, the Volterra Syndicate ceased to exist. Adrian signed the final, irrevocable charter. The Aegis Trust became the Volterra Foundation, its first act a $2 million endowment for the very fund we had held the night before. The last knot was tied. We were in the brownstone. It was raining, a gentle, quiet rain, not the violent assault of that first night. I was trying to teach Adrian the chords to a simple folk song on the piano. He was terrible. The front door burst open, and Nori ran in, soaked, home from school. She didn't stop. She ran right past the piano and launched herself, backpack and all, into a flying hug that caught both of us. "Zio-aid mommy," she laughed, wrapping her arms around both our necks. "It's raining, let's go home." Adrian looked at me over the top of her head. He was smiling. He picked her up, settling her on his hip. He took my hand. "Yeah," he said, Let's go home." And the three of us walked out of the music room toward the kitchen, leaving the right door, the endgame door, the dangerous door, behind us, and we just walked through the left one. The lights of Port Calloway were coming on outside the window, soft and blurred by the rain, ruffling down on us, not as a warning, but as a promise. Thank you so much for listening to our story. Where in the world are you listening from? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please comment below so we can all connect and share. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. And if you really want to support us, hit that hype button to help this story be heard by more people. We'll see you in the next chapter.